Think about the priority when it comes to the cash flow of your business, what's going to be the seed money to help you build, and what's going to help you accelerate and scale to the next level. Because Peter's going to be talking a lot about that today. But let me tell you a little bit of the accolades of Peter. So Peter Adams is the co-author of Venture Capital for Dummies. I could use that book. And serves as the executive director of the Rockies Venture Club, the longest running angel investment group in the US. He serves as an officer on the board. No, Siri. Siri's like, what are you talking about Peter Adams for? He serves as an officer on the board of the Angel Capital Association, runs the Rockies Venture Fund and Rockies Impact Fund, investing in social and environmental-oriented companies, the founder of Rockies Venture Institute, the Women's Investment Network, and Biz Girls, a nonprofit CEO accelerator for young women. That's really cool. That was a lot, wasn't it? He's pretty accomplished. And you know, one thing I think you're going to really understand about Peter is that he is the most likable person I have ever met. It's almost annoying. But it's wonderful. So please welcome Peter Adams of Rockies Venture Fund.
All right. Wow, what an introduction. That was awesome. So let me ask you a question. How many of you are anticipating raising money in the next 12 months? Okay. Oh, way to go, Martin. Standing up. All right, well, that's great. So I'm going to talk to you about the perspective of the investor. And I'm going to talk to you about what angels are looking for and what VCs are looking for, just to give you some of the background perspective. One of the big values of the Rockies Venture Club is transparency. And so we are all built around removing all of the mystery behind how we do investments and what do investors look for and how do companies prepare. And in fact, as Anastasia mentioned, we spent the whole day yesterday just totally, opening the kimono, talking about how we think about deals, how we value them, how we go through due diligence, and all of that. So I'm going to give you just a little bit of, just a tiny bit of that today. So what I'd like to do is tell you that when we evaluate deals, there's two things we look at: risk and opportunity. And in this day of unicorns, there's a lot of VCs who are like, well, we're not going to talk about risk. We're just going for unicorns. It's all going to be big, and the rest of them be damned. Well, in Colorado, we don't think that way. We want everybody to be successful. We're hitting good singles and doubles every day. So what do angels look for? Well, I can tell you, here's what they don't want, and it's failure. So there's a lot of ways that companies fail. In fact, about half of companies that angels or VCs invest in are going to fail, despite our best efforts. About 50% of companies fail. So we need to be able to say, well, what are those characteristics of companies that fail, and how do we avoid that? And so CB Insights put together some data, and they analyzed thousands of companies that had failed, and they came up with these top 10 deals, top 10 reasons why companies fail. And I found a trend in those that, of those, all but one are highlighted. And here's what's interesting. Look at the descriptions. There's no market need. It's not the right team. Got out-competed. Pricing cost issues. Poor product. There's no business model. Poor marketing. Or ignore the customers. Almost every one of these has to do with the team and their awareness and connection to their market. Understanding who their customer is, what the value proposition, how they price it, and all of that. And this is the number one reason companies fail. Except actually, this is kind of weird that it's number two. Ran out of cash is the other one. Ultimately, this is the only reason companies fail. I don't care if you got a poor product, you've got cash, you're gonna keep banging your head against the damn wall until you run out of cash. If you've got no market need, doesn't matter, bang your head against the wall, run out of cash, that's when you run, that's when you're out of business. So we're looking at what are the causes of why businesses run out of cash, and it's mostly about teams. The teams are not the right teams to be connected to the customers and understanding what they need to do to compete. All right, so that's the risk side of things. We think a lot about that, and we think about teams and how they're going to do that, but now venture capitalists and angels are really thinking about opportunity. We want to know what is going to be big in the market, what's going to be successful, and it turns out innovation is the key, right? So there's two types of small businesses. The first type is, the type that might work with the SBDICs or the SBA, and these are small businesses. It might be a food truck, might be even a legal office, CPAs. These are businesses that have low risk, and they're what we call lifestyle companies, and they're great. A lot of people run these, but they are not venture capital businesses. So we have an entirely different way of evaluating these companies. But venture capital businesses, it's like 1% of all businesses. We get a lot of people come to us, hey, I got this food truck, I need some venture capital. Well, that's not what venture capital is. It's not capital for your venture. It's this really specific type of investment. And it requires innovation. You've got to be doing something that is totally different than what everybody else is doing and has barriers to entry that keeps other people away from doing what you're doing, and you've got to be able to grow 2x at least year on year on year and return something like 10 times the investor's money within 3 to 5 years. So that's a very, very narrow section of businesses. So what causes innovation? And the answer is really diversity. If you've got a monoculture, you're not going to have innovation. You're going to have more of the same old thing. You've really got to have diverse teams, people coming at problems with totally new and unique ways. So let me just give you a little quiz. Let's say you're an investor, and you're looking at company A and company B, and you're going to invest in one of them based on their team. So here's company A. Boomer team. They look great. They've been through multiple economic downturns. They know how to prepare and react to those. They've seen what works and what doesn't. They know how to scale up a company. They've got the experience. They know it's a qualitatively different thing as well as a quantitatively different thing. They've got their Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours. They've got the experience. They can see the patterns in nature and in business, and they can build business plans to make those things happen, and they can separate the noise from the signal. Good-looking team. Or the Gen Y team, these guys are also looking pretty awesome. They're not bound by tradition. These guys are the innovators. They're tapped in to social change. They're right in the middle of everything that is happening. They think anything's possible. They're tech savvy, and they're out innovating the incumbents. All right, show of hands. How many people want to invest in the boomer team? All right, 1. Okay, 2, thanks, Mike. All right, and how many people want to invest in the Gen Y team? All right, I guess we don't have very many investors in the audience. That's all right. Well, I haven't even shown you the other side of the equation, because think again. That's the upside of those teams. What about the other side of the boomers? They might be calcified in their way of doing things. They might have this attitude like, hey, if it worked in the past, it's going to work in the future. We don't need no stinking innovation. They got the innovator's dilemma. If you've read Clayton Christensen's book, The Innovator's Dilemma, these guys cannot change and innovate now because they innovated 10, 20, 30 years ago, and they have a super successful model so far doing what they are doing. They can't take the risk to do something else. And they're disconnected from current trends. They're just busy doing their own thing. Maybe not looking so good anymore. Gen Y team, they've got their own problems. They've got no experience in scaling big. And this is the key thing for growing a venture company. They fail fast and often. They don't know what works and what doesn't. They have to test it, and they're failing. That's what happens. They're reinventing the wheel. They lack the perspective of years and years of experience, and they tend to oversimplify complex problems. They see things as just things to be conquered, but they don't realize just how difficult it is. So, now, who wants to invest in the boomer team? 1, okay, 2, good. And who wants to invest in the Gen Y team? Even fewer. All right, so now nobody wants to invest. Well, this is my job. Welcome to my world. I have to invest in these things, and I have a fiduciary duty. This is other people's money, and you think pitching to VCs is hard? Being a VC and writing the check is just scary as shit, right? I mean, you lose sleep over this. So, but here's the answer, is you want both of those teams together, right? They've got their strengths, they've got their weaknesses. Put them together, you've got peanut butter and chocolate, Reese's peanut butter ads. You only get to see those Reese's peanut butter things if you were like a boomer, so there you go. All right, so diverse teams, these are the ones that can innovate and succeed at scaling in a market. So now, let's look back at these things. All of the causes of failure, now we're addressing those things and we're mitigating those causes of failure, right? And Harvard University has done tons of research on these age-diverse teams, and they found that people with different perspectives and experiences better understand their current and potential customers, right? So you've got to have your market, and then you've got to build it too. So having these diverse teams are how you go about doing that. And if you don't have people on your staff who look like your customers, you will have blind spots. And I'll say one thing that scares me as an investor is thinking about investing in a company who's going to go do something and then they're going to be surprised. They've got blind spots. Surprises are bad for startups, right? So having diverse teams gives you more insight into who your customers are and your potential customers and how that works. And in fact, one of the key psychological traits that I look for in teams, this is a red flag thing, is this confirmation bias. And you know it when you see it. You get a team comes in, they give this pitch, they're all excited, and meanwhile, all the people, the investors in the room are like scratching their heads. They're like, this is weird. This doesn't make any sense. And what these guys are doing is drinking their own Kool-Aid, and it usually is a monoculture team. And these are the teams that we are typically not investing in because they've got this monoculture and confirmation bias, and that is what kills companies. They're not open to opportunities and don't understand the risks. So here's one other really interesting thing. Thinking about diversity, it doesn't take a lot of diversity to create an innovative team. As long as you have just one person on your team who understands the needs of the customer, then the entire team is going to understand that better. So I was preparing for this talk, and this came across my path Monday morning in the Wall Street Journal. And this is a perfect example of a company who is doing this and putting this one person in charge. It was a great story on Monday. And basically what Nike is doing is they have picked this 9-year-old girl to be their spokesperson for the youth market. And Nike has an entire segment of youth products. And you can imagine some 50-year-old guy developing these products and how that's going to work out. But she's been writing blogs, doing videos, she's doing art, she's doing all these really cool things, and Nike has brought her on. Really a cool way of talking about a multi-generational team going back down to 9 years old. So you're thinking, okay, I'm buying into this, Peter. That sounds good. We should have some multi-generational teams. Let's just do it. That's what Nike said. All right, so it should be easy, right? But it turns out it's not. It's hard to build multi-generational teams, and it doesn't happen by itself. It's not something you can just say, we are trying to do this and make it happen. In fact, it's more difficult than you might think. If you are starting your team as a monoculture, people will see your team and say, that's not for me. Those are all middle-aged white guys. And so I don't want to join that team. I'm probably not welcome. I won't look like the people on that team. So you need to be intentional. And we've done this in investing. We've had to be intentional about building the companies that we invest in and making sure that they're diverse, and then also building our investor community and make sure they're diverse. And believe me, it's hard. Even after 2 years of being intentional, we've grown our women investor network from, by maybe 20%, just a tiny amount by, holding events, doing all this stuff, having full-time staff working on it. It is really hard, even if you are intentional. So I'm going to give you just 10 steps about how you might go about building these teams and what goes into this. And the first is making it safe. Making it safe to propose novel ideas. And you know what's interesting about this? I bet you all agree this would be a good thing. But why doesn't it happen? It's because the people who make the decisions about whether it's safe or not are safe. That's the senior folks. They're the ones who are given all the ideas, and they say, yeah, it's easy. I give ideas, everybody says I'm a genius, we do it, it's all good, right? But if you're a junior member, you're sitting there, and you make a suggestion and then you get, whatever. It's not safe. And so there's this unconscious bias that occurs in companies, and people look at their own experience, they go, yeah, I make suggestions all the time, no problem, but problem, right? So you've got to create this safety, and you've got to make ways for this to happen. So part of it is, this is culture. This is creating a culture that allows this, and there are processes and tools that you can use as a company to help encourage this kind of thing. One of our portfolio companies, Comcero, makes a product called MC Squares. And what's cool about this, I love the CEO, Anthony Franco, gets up and he says, I'm an introvert, which you would never guess when you see him on stage. He's just awesome. But he says, I'm an introvert, and what I noticed is in teams, the extroverts are the ones who do all the talking, and their ideas get heard, and then they get implemented. And guess what? A lot of the genius people are introverts, and they're not heard. So we created this product, MC Squares, where people are all giving their input, and then they all go up on the wall, independent of a person. Everybody gets heard. Things like that are ways you can make sure that you're creating a culture that supports all ideas. And by the way, supporting all ideas doesn't mean implementing all ideas, right? I mean, of course you're not going to do every idea from anybody. So next thing, and I will just tell you, I have trouble with this one. So I'm making fun of California here a little bit, but this idea of legislating diversity it keeps coming up over and over again, and it's a challenge. And I will say, because of the unconscious bias, you have to think, how do we kickstart this thing to create real change? And so, in some regards, I applaud California. You know, I don't know if you just read, it's House Bill 862, where they're saying, look, public companies have to have at least one woman on the board, or if you've got 6 people on the board, at least 3 have to be women. You know, it's kind of cool, but it also has some drawbacks. The critics say that this is bad because we're saying, oh, well, we have to put these women on the board because of their gender, not because of their accomplishments. But what I say is, well, the reason they're not on the board now is because of their gender, not their accomplishments, right? So how do you fix that, right? So this is the kind of thing where, you know, when you have this unconscious bias, you need to sometimes do something like legislating to make it happen and create that culture, or rewards of some kind. And I'll tell you, I've been participating with the Women's Leadership Foundation here in Denver, and we have this board-bound program. And just sitting at tables, it's amazing watching, you know, people say, well, you know, just work hard and be recognized, and you'll be on the board. And this is the people who are open to this topic and working and volunteering, and they are CEOs of public companies who we get together every few months and talk about this, and they don't realize it's not just working hard. It's not just trying to be recognized. It's not just being in finance. There's other things that are going on, and you know, women have to be twice as good to move ahead. And same thing with young people. There's this unconscious bias, and we need to overcome that. All right, the other thing is critical mass matters. So if you put in a token young person, token black person, token old person, token woman, it's probably not going to work. They're going to wonder, why am I in here? I feel all alone. There is something about critical mass of communities that gives people the confidence to actually make those suggestions and be providing that innovative input. We tried that attitude. I got my old typewriter up here. Here's the thing about innovation. And this is a big thing about venture capital, is timing is everything. That's one of the top things we look at. Is this the time for this idea? And the history of entrepreneurship is littered with carcasses of companies like Alta Vista, who were, you know, that was the first, you know, search engine. Who uses that today? Yeah, we all use Google, right? I mean, but Alta Vista, they were first to market. That was great. Their timing was bad. Or artificial intelligence. If you're doing that in the 80s and 90s, not so good, right? But today, we've got the great data sets, the computing power, the tools. This is a great time to be in artificial intelligence. So timing is really important. So you want to make sure that as a team that is building diversity, and that you don't have these folks who, back in the 80s and 90s, got burned by something, and then when new ideas come up, you go, we tried that. Well, guess what? Whatever you tried in the 80s and 90s, that was a different world. And there are a lot of new things you can do today. And this is why we want the diversity. We don't want people who've already sort of got this confirmation bias of, well, we know this doesn't work because it didn't work 20, 30 years ago, all right? Creating generational diversity at all levels, including leadership. You know, some companies just measure how many people they have in their company that are diverse. But putting people on the boards, putting people in at the C-suite, getting that 9-year-old, you know, into the board of directors at Nike, that would be cool. You know, I would love that. At Rockies Venture Club, you know, I've added 20-somethings to my board, and I've learned more from those guys than I have from some of the older people. They are tapped in to the Boulder startup community. They can tell us what people are really thinking and how this is all different than it was 33 years ago when we started Rockies Venture Club. So having those folks are my most valuable people on my board. So it really does work. So another one is share credit for success. So when I was younger, I had a mentor, and I would make these suggestions. You know, I'd be kind of timid, you know, in these rooms. And, you know, when they took one of my suggestions and ran with it, like a week, 2 weeks, 2 months later, this guy was still saying, yeah, and this was Peter's thing, and it was so cool. And I was like, hey, yeah, that's cool. I'm going to make some more suggestions. This is good stuff. So, you know, making that recognition is really, really important to make sure it keeps on happening. Because there's 3 things that can happen when somebody makes a suggestion. One, the senior person takes all the credit for it. It's unethical, dishonest, and crappy leadership. Or 2, you take the idea, you run with it, but you never recognize who did it. Or 3, you sort of continually reward and reinforce that behavior, and that's how you get more and more of that. Okay, so now, remember back to our 2 teams we started off, give and receive actionable feedback. So this is interesting, and this is both ways, right? This is not, you know, you got your mentor, tells you what to do, it's your performance review, and then you have to do that, maybe you get a raise, maybe you don't. No, this is both ways. So being able, as a senior member, to receive that actionable feedback and act upon it, and then as a junior member, receiving not just feedback like, oh, your communication sucks, but things you can actually work on that are measurable and you understand. So actionable is the key word here, and then of course, bidirectional giving and receiving is critical. All right, so seek out diversity, don't wait for it. I guarantee you it won't just come. You've got to create these cultures, you've got to seek these out, and this means doing things you may not be normally doing. It means coming to things like this. I mean, this is one of the most awesome events because just look at this room. We've got an amazing amount of diversity and people who are open to diversity and seeking it out. Doing things like this, but you know, networking in other organizations and getting engaged with communities you might not normally be engaged with in order to get that diversity. So back to the Harvard studies, companies that have sort of the speak up culture and encourage and get people to really participate, they have 3.5 times more innovative potential than those that don't. 3.5 times. In a day and age, in venture capital-backed companies, where having innovation is the key to success or possibly failure, having this kind of a culture and this kind of a diverse community is the way the companies are successful today. So, so final thoughts. Not everybody is the same. So you don't want to hire for just one characteristic. You've sat here, I did a caricature of boomers, and I did a caricature of Gen Y people. Yeah, some people are like that. Maybe in general, they might be like that. But don't just build teams based on this. You're actually doing sort of a reverse discrimination by doing that. Think about what you really need in your team. Create the diversity, but make sure you're also looking for at the individual and the individual skills they bring and what your organization needs. So, businesses that rely on innovation will benefit from supporting diversity. It's that easy. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Peter. Adams, hug real quick. Big hug. One more time, please, for Peter Adams. Wasn't that great?